Before we get started, I'll mention that if folks have questions, they can feel free to write them or raise their hand on the electronic next to their name. Looks like we have really two attendees and two staff people here. I'm hoping a couple more people are calling in. Oh, there we get some more folks. And to talk about the program. As far as I can tell at the moment, the two people on the line are both familiar with the program, so I can work through this pretty quickly and focus on answering some questions. There are some new program elements, and I'll be bringing my colleague Danielle Dolan in to chat about that in a little bit. But why don't we go ahead and get started? And as folks can, maybe a couple more people will join us. And this is being recorded, and so if you have anybody you want to share this with, you can feel free to let us know. We'll be posting this on our website. So for today's agenda, we'll be going over CivicSpark as a whole. We will be talking in detail about the program and also introducing a new program that we are very, very confident will be funded and starting in the fall, called the Water Corps, or Water Action Corps. And it will be a slight difference of program, and we'll go over some of those details, and Danielle Dolan is heading that up and will be on the line to explain that program. We'll talk about for both the application process and timeline, and then take some questions. So by way of overview, and I know unless some new folks have joined us today, it looks like I've just got Adam Lenz and BC Caps, who are both familiar with the Local Government Commission and familiar with the CivicSpark program. So you guys, if you want, feel free to just let me know, and we can open this up for more dialogue unless other folks join us. But this is our first of 3 sessions, so I will take it a little bit more informally, knowing that it's two familiar voices or faces on the line. So you guys are familiar with LGC. What we do in the program is we do the overall program infrastructure. We do all the recruiting, supportive services. We try and link together the program elements as an AmeriCorps program and coordinate the training, and then make sure that we're meeting our goals as a federally funded AmeriCorps program. CivicSpark is a governor's initiative AmeriCorps program, and what that means is that we have a relationship with the governor's office, and this is a governor's priority topic area. The Water Corps program I'll talk about in a little bit also fits that bill. It is another governor's initiative, and we will be working with state agencies to make sure that there is a focus on alignment and dialogue between state agencies and public participants, both in terms of gathering information about what's going on at the local level and sharing resources. The need for CivicSpark was born out of a recognition that there are increasing requirements placed on public sector, local governments, public agencies related to climate change, related to key issues. Water is another one. And they are forcing lots of new technology, new techniques, new analyses, programs, plans to be fielded at the local level, but there are not the corresponding level of capacity. So what you see in this diagram is a chart between public and private sector employment, and that's from 2008 through 2015. And you see that in the private sector, there was a pretty strong rebound in 2009, back up and beyond where employment was at. But local government, the public sector, has never quite recovered. And that means that as these new requirements and new issues are coming to the fore, we passed 4 bills last year related to climate change and adaptation. And there is no staff capacity, or there is less staff capacity than there was just a few years ago. And so this is the kind of environment in which additional support to help process, analyze, research, develop plans, and even implement programs can be really valuable. This program is a partnership with the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. It's designed to create support for local and regional initiatives and create that link between the available tools and state goals, and share CivicSpark successes throughout the state so that best practices that we're seeing in the field can be replicated more broadly so we can all advance to the challenges that we're facing. CivicSpark is a large team from the AmeriCorps members, the fellows themselves, who are college educated with, we hope, relevant experience, service commitments, who provide that on the ground services, to Encore.org, who provides the project managers, the regional coordinators, as we call them, to serve and support and mentor the fellows and be our local feet on the ground in each region, to the Corporation for National and Community Service, who actually manages overall national AmeriCorps programs, of which there's about 80,000 members nationally. And in California, that's through California Volunteers, which is the state service commission. Currently, we're serving in 8 regions of California for CivicSpark as the existing program. The new program that we'll talk about in a little bit is going to serve in some other regions, but in some similar regions. But we're scattered throughout the state, and this map is a map of the different agencies and COGs and counties that we're serving this current year. And you can see we span from up in Eureka all the way down to LA. We didn't have a presence in San Diego this year, but we hope to serve as much of the state as possible. And our team through CivicSpark consists of 3 to 8 AmeriCorps fellows, their regional coordinator, and usually a regional partner who helps broadcast the opportunity in the region. And that's been the structure that we've had for the last 2 years and that we'll have going into our 3rd year. The approach to the program is really about identifying strong candidates, placing them in the 9 regions or 8 regions that we're working in, engaging the public agencies that we want to support, and building capacity through project implementation. We do a pretty robust recruitment process. It's a national process. Last year we had about 350 applicants for 48 slots. That's actually a little bit above more established AmeriCorps programs. And we place them through a matching process with agencies like Sonoma County and Richmond, who are on the line, and others. And it's ideally a process whereby we're front-loading strong candidates, screening them for commitment to the program, and so that when they get in the hands of the partners that we have, they already feel like they could be making a choice between some strong candidates. Those members, those fellows, are intended to support up to 96 public agencies, which is about 2 agencies apiece. Those can be departments within one overall local government or across multiple local governments. But we really try and have each fellow serve at least 2 beneficiaries, as we call them. And then they're building the capacity through the project work and through the structure of the project work as we do it. The way that we designed our capacity building model to support a wide range of action in the climate space is by creating an overarching umbrella structure, but that allows for a lot of project variation. So we have 4 steps that happen, some in parallel, some in sequence. The first step for the fellows is to conduct a gap assessment. This is a very high-level review of the documents related to climate action for the community and an interview with the core staff that they're going to be working with so they can understand the goals for the project as it relates to their capacity building service. The service projects are by far the largest chunk of the work and are really designed to do something that's going to leave a lasting impact. They can be typically research, planning, or implementation focused, depending on where the local government is at. And the program was really designed around meeting local governments where they're at. In parallel with their service project, all members are engaged in some form of volunteer engagement. This is above and beyond their service project commitment to their partner. It may happen in alignment and in partnership with their partner, but it doesn't have to. We see it as a professional development opportunity, a community engagement opportunity, and also a place for our regional coordinators to engage with the members more directly on implementing something. And then at the end of each service year, we try and design a transitional activity. This is means for allowing the fellow not just to turn off the lights and hand over their files electronically, but identify an opportunity to reflect on what was accomplished and ideally share results or identify next steps so that we see that capacity building gain carrying forward into the future. Some project examples to highlight here. We're implementing climate action plans in a lot of areas. This is a pretty common activity for CivicSpark members. They might be working on the inventory side or actually implementing measures in a variety of communities. They're actually developing a statewide climate action database to support local action across multiple communities. And some of these projects, like that one, actually have a state agency component as well as a local action component. We're working with Water LA to develop some work around the river, the LA River, and restoring it to prior conditions, and trying to work with local governments to improve the conditions and bring back the river to support water conservation efforts. We're doing water energy system improvements in the Sierras, working with local government staff to identify and perform leak training. And I think, if I remember correctly from Sierra Business Council, they're going to do more leak detection activities, or more miles of pipeline, than have been done in about 5 years in the Sierras, just in a short training period. So there's this opportunity to do a lot more work using the dedicated resources or by training other people. We're working in the transportation space, supporting accelerated adoption of electric vehicles in the North Coast. That's a CEC-funded project for which CivicSpark was built in as an assistance to what was being done by Redwood Coast Energy Authority. And then we're identifying some climate risks and performing assessments on the high-speed rail line. And again, that's a partnership with a state agency, but that has a local component. And we're working with some local agencies on the assessment of that work. Wanted to give you one project spotlight from last year. This was a water energy nexus project that I thought was a really neat project in the Bay Area. For Kyle, you can see from this quote, he had a really great experience. He actually was hired on to continue some of the work in the BOSCA, which is the Bay Area Water Conservation Alliance. I probably got the name wrong, but oh, there it is, Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, helping to do water education and outreach in San Mateo County Public Schools. So he got to host an award ceremony. He facilitated workshops and conducted auditing activities with schools to identify water conservation efforts. And that's just one individual story. And obviously with 48 members, we have a lot of different individual stories that are going on, and showing how the members' experience is rewarding, the opportunity for building resources can be valuable, and hopefully we leave something for the community. These are some more kind of iterative examples where we feel like the partnership on an approach had some particular benefits. This sort of, so you can see in Los Angeles, one of the CivicSpark fellows developed a water conservation cost benefit analysis tool. This was a spreadsheet-based tool where they identified the wide array of water sources and sinks for LA County, of which I believe there are hundreds. And they were able to identify and prioritize water-saving opportunities for county facilities. And you can see at the bottom line there that there was a huge amount of potential savings in cost and water and metric tons of CO2 that could come out of this kind of tool that was developed because the fellow had the time to do the research that most staff are not going to. In the Southern California Association of Governments, we worked on developing, 3 fellows helped develop the Energy Assessment Screening for Your Home, the EASY program. This was modeled on a Fresno home energy tune-up program. The members built out the marketing, the resources, then they started doing home audits, and they were able to go out and complete over 70 energy assessments in 17 cities, reaching 1,700 customers over the course of just 1 year. Some of our larger statistics of impact, these are always good numbers to share with folks. In the 2014-15 service year, so that was our first service year, we provided over 62,000 hours of service to California communities. So that's a really big number of hours of people dedicated to climate action across the state. And you can see from some of the kinds of work that we did that we were able to complete a lot of key policy assessments, inventories, workshops, and reports for the different communities that we're working with. We engaged over 2,500 community members directly. We completed 37 projects with over 88 local government agencies were provided that service, so touching 88 government agencies across the state. Over 95% of the completed projects met or exceeded our goals. And these are the goals defined by the local government participants themselves. So they were able to set out a goal for the members fellow, and at the end of that project say, yeah, we met or exceeded that goal. for this year, as I mentioned, we had, I guess, 7 applications for each open position. And we're currently implementing 42 projects supporting over 100 local government agencies. And we're annually leveraging about $1 million in local match funding to meet the federal funding that we have. So at this point, I want to, and I've been kind of cruising through this pretty quickly, as I said I would, because we've got just a few people. I see Joe Souza has joined us as well. But I'm going to turn it over to Danielle Dolan to talk a little bit about the Water Corps program. Danielle, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
I can, yeah. Welcome, Danielle.
Terrific. Thank you. And hi, folks. Thanks for joining the webinar today. I'm Danielle Dolan. I'm the Water Program Manager for LGC. And as Kif mentioned, we're launching a new program this fall in conjunction with CivicSpark called Water Corps. And we will have 20 fellows placed in teams of 2 across the state. And as Kif mentioned, we're looking at different regions than the CivicSpark regions. Originally, we were thinking the 10 major watersheds of the state. If you're familiar with the IRWIM program, the Integrated Regional Water Management, those would be the same as the 10 funding regions. And we're also thinking about that would align the fellows more closely with the regional water boards and the Department of Water Resources regional offices. But we haven't determined all the details on the locations yet. So that's still open to suggestion, and it'll really depend on where the greatest need is and where the interest is for fellows to be placed. As Kif mentioned earlier, it's becoming more and more challenging for local governments to implement all of these state mandates, and that's truer in no other sector more so than in water. You have the recent mandated water use reductions due to the California drought. You have the new model water efficient landscape ordinances, the new stormwater strategic initiative, and the MS4 program requirements, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and those associated requirements, water energy nexus programs coming down the pipe, and what hasn't been put into act yet but is starting to gain some traction, an issue that's near and dear to LGC's heart, is the connection between water management and land use planning. And we have been active in this arena for a very long time, but it's starting to gain traction with both state agencies and local agencies that are finally starting to recognize this connection. And I'm confident that there probably will be some new mandates in the next few years on this. So we're trying to be proactive and focus these CivicSpark Water Corps fellows on that water and land use connection to build local capacity so that all of you public agencies can be proactive and start addressing some of those issues and focus some very skilled, young, energetic folks on some of these really challenging issues that the state is asking us to look at. The program will mirror CivicSpark. There's a few minor differences. The cost is reduced, but the level of supervision is increased, and some of the eligibility requirements are different. So we're eliminating the middle layer of those regional coordinators, and this is where a lot of that cost reduction comes from, and it streamlines the process. But the vision is that these fellows will be placed in pairs and really be embedded within their host site as more like strategic, focused temp employees of that agency. So that would require more supervision on the part of the agency to provide, daily oversight and some training. But you will work very closely with LGC. We will have a staff person in-house that will help coordinate with all of those sites. Because there's only 20 fellows as opposed to 48 with CivicSpark, we think that that's a more streamlined approach, and we're able to reduce the cost that way. And the eligibility requirements are different because they're specific to water, whereas the CivicSpark eligibility is very specific to climate change. So we'll get into the specific eligibility requirements in a few minutes, but they're focused on that water and land use connection rather than climate change. Next slide, Kit. Thank you. So the whole goal of this program, as I said, is to help local leaders respond to these statewide priorities. specifically that water land use connection and implementing the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and also the California Water Action Plan. There's a lot of emphasis at the state level now that we have this water action plan of how it's implemented at the local level. And within SIGMA as well, the state is taking action, but is putting all of the implementation on the shoulders of the local governments because they want to give local governments the control, which is a valid point, but you also need the capacity in order to do so. So one of the primary goals that the fellows will work on is building cross-sector network development. So aligning all of the many local agencies within a region that have some relation to water management. And I'm sure you're well aware the fact that we have over 500 water agencies in the state, and we have different agencies to manage water supply versus water quality versus stormwater versus wastewater versus water rights. And it's all completely disconnected, and trying to integrate across those different sectors and jurisdictions is incredibly complex, and no agency has a dedicated staff person responsible for making those connections. So we're hoping that these fellows will be able to fill that role. Some of the issues that they'll be working on are the water implications of land use planning, groundwater management, flood mitigation, water supply and demand challenges, and overall watershed health. And our vision is that these issues have to be addressed from an integrated approach if we want our local communities to be vibrant and water strong in the future. Next slide.
So at this point, I'll talk about the fiscal contribution for the program. I'll let Danielle talk about WaterCorps' estimated fiscal contribution. And I'll mention that WaterCorps, we have a proposal in. We've not gotten final funding, so if some of it sounds tentative, it's because we are very confident that it's going to be selected as a governor's initiative, and we've kind of softly heard that. But we can't absolutely nail everything down until we do. But in the meantime, Danielle's going out and talking to interested parties, and if anybody is, you should follow up with her, and we'll have her contact information at the end. But there is a fiscal contribution required. CivicSpark is funded both by CNCS, which is the Corporation for National Community Service, and partner fiscal contributions. This can be coming from NGOs, local governments. You can contract directly with us for the the CivicSpark or WaterCorps Fellow support. You can also have other parties, third parties, provide funding. We've had situations like that. As I know, Richmond is benefiting from some support from the East Bay Energy Watch. We've had also some sponsored positions come in from other folks. So there's a lot of ways that this can work, but there is a cost that comes to us. The full program cost is about twice what you see here as far as the contribution that we're asking for from partners. So we bucket in CivicSpark the opportunities in time periods because we have these people deployed for a period of 11 months. And so having a fellow assigned for a given set period is really important to us so that we know that their time is covered. So initially we started with more of an hourly based approach, but we shifted from that because we found that the vast majority of partners picked the full term, and we wanted to provide an advantage for that structure, but still allow for some partners who didn't quite have as much demand to be able to work with us. Now, if you pick with CivicSpark less than a full fellow for the full 11 months, we have to match it with somebody. So there can be some uncertainty unless we know, or you come to us with a partner in hand and you want to share a fellow. And we have several fellows throughout the Bay Area and other parts of the state that are being shared quite effectively. One fellow is being shared between 3 communities, but we need to work those out in advance. So it's definitely an option. It's a little bit more expensive because of the structure of the support that we have to provide. But you can see here that the base costs for the 3-month option is $6,500. For 6 months, it's $12,350, and for 11 months, it's $23,400. For that, you get either 325, 650, or 1,300 hours. If in the 11-month option, we actually give you 1,300 plus because really anything that doesn't get taken up by their training and their service activities that are not part of your project gets given to the project partner. So the members have a 1,700-hour total service commitment. They often serve a little bit more than that. And so they do some training, they do community service activities, they do their volunteer engagement, and everything else is given to the partner service. Part of the additional benefits of that program structure is that we have them start up the project on our dime, so to speak. So we assign the first half a week to up to 2 weeks for an 11-month fellow to prepare for the project. And that can be some of the admin activities to get started. It can be some of their initial site organization. We also have a modest travel budget for their project-related travel. If you have a role that's going to have the fellow doing a lot of work around the community, traveling every day, and you need them to use their car, you're going to need a separate budget for that, because we can't ask our fellows to bear that burden, and we only have so much that we can afford to do in that space. So those are the fiscal side for CivicSpark. I'll let Danielle chime in about how we're structuring WaterCore, which is a little different.
Thanks, Kip. So as I mentioned before, we're placing those fellows in teams of 2. So we're hoping the host site will be able to sponsor the team of fellows completely. And then just like CivicSpark, you're able to farm out the projects to other participants to make up that cost, so that the host site doesn't have to bear the full burden of that cost. But hopefully, just to streamline the process on LGC's side, we want to contract directly with the host site for that full sponsorship of the team of 2 fellows. And so that cost is $37,000 for the full service year of 11 months, which works out to be about 2,700 project hours, and at an hourly rate for the fellow of about $13 an hour. And I'm sorry, an hourly cost to the host of $13 an hour. And we do have, rather than a specific travel fund, we have up to $3,000 of a stipend to the host site to help offset the cost of those extra supervisory responsibilities that you have. So if you are the host supervisor for the 2 fellows, but the projects that the fellows complete are fully funded by the other project beneficiaries, and then you could get the additional $3,000 would just go to the host site to help cover your own costs.
Thanks, Danielle. So for both programs, I think I made a change that's going to a little variation in Danielle's slide. I didn't see we were editing it this morning, but this is the CivicSpark application and project startup process. And they're quite similar. There's a little difference at the end, but there's an initial project application, and currently CivicSpark's application is available online. It includes providing some basic project details and information about the public agencies that will be receiving services, because as is often the case with us, it's not necessarily that the service beneficiary is the project partner who's hosting the project. In the case if it's an NGO, or maybe it's a COG that's going to be serving multiple local governments, or an Energy Watch partnership. Then the next step for us is completing a service agreement, which is really like a consulting services agreement. We describe the project scope, the hours, the total cost, the mutual responsibilities. For us, the next step is then a pre-service capacity survey. And this is part of being an AmeriCorps program. We have to track the impacts, and one of the ways that we do it is through a pre and post survey of the local governments that we are serving. And so we have to get those done before or very early on when the fellows start, so that we have that baseline information, so that when we can go back at the end of the project and determine whether we met those goals and whether there's been some changes. And for CivicSpark, the next step is a gap assessment, as we call it, which includes a review of key documents and an interview with the local government staff person in order to make sure that we are aligning the goals of the project to the abilities and capabilities of the program to meet those goals. And then Danielle added an animation that I didn't see, so a little different on WaterSpark. And I apologize, Danielle, because I changed your text for you, not knowing that that animation was there. So I'll let you explain what the difference is at that last stage for WaterCore.
Sure, and I appreciate everyone on the line and your understanding of our trying to make edits across the country in short time since we can't be in the same office together today. But for WaterCore, we're eliminating the gap assessment and instead going straight to a project scope of work that the fellow and the site supervisors will work with your project partners to outline a very specific scope of work to initiate their project. So it just eliminates that one additional step of the gap assessment, because generally with the gap assessment, that's a very useful tool for CivicSpark and for their tracking of progress and of their impact, and there's some reporting on the back end. But with WaterCore, we're eliminating the gap assessment and moving straight to the scope of work. My experience with CivicSpark is you do the gap assessment and then you also do an additional scope of work. So we're eliminating that middle phase.
Thanks, Danielle. So now I'll talk about CivicSpark eligibility and then let Danielle talk about WaterCore eligibility. In both programs, we define a need based on the absence of something. And if you are familiar with CivicSpark, it's the absence of a full-time dedicated sustainability staff person or a formally adopted climate action plan or similar mechanism, or having specific mechanisms in place to annually track climate action progress. And we have a pretty high bar for that last one because we recognize that while some local governments are tracking some pieces of their climate action work, a comprehensive system is what's really needed in the long run to be able to holistically address climate change. And so it's important that that any local government we're serving not have one of those, but just one is fine. And by and large, most local governments, in fact, all that I've ever met, don't have at least one of those things. Some don't have all three as they're just getting going. And as an added detail is the projects are a minimum of 200 hours, but with our new structure where we have the 3-month minimum, that's not really a problem. Go ahead, Danielle.
And thank you. And very similar to CivicSpark, our eligibility requirements are a pretty low bar. We're thinking that almost any community or agency in the state could meet one of these requirements and therefore qualify for a WaterCore project. And again, it's measured by the absence of one of these criteria. And all 4 of the criteria are designed to get at the heart of that water land use connection and the interjurisdictional, interagency collaboration. So the first potential criteria is lacking a dedicated staff person that's responsible for those cross-sector and interjurisdictional collaboration or coordinating on water and land use issues. I know of very few agencies that actually have a staff person dedicated to either of those tasks. Secondly, the agency is not a member of an IRWIMP, that's an Integrated Regional Water Management Plan, or an IRWIM group. Most of the state is now covered. I believe 99% of the state is covered by IRWM regions, but not every agency is necessarily participating in their regional IRWM. The third criteria is active participation in the implementation of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. That's either through participating in the formation of a GSA, a Groundwater Sustainability Agency, or actively participating in the development of that groundwater sustainability plan. And this criteria specifically is very timely because those GSAs need to be formed by January of next year. And then those GSPs need to be developed and implemented by 2020. So this is a pretty fast-paced timeline. I know 2020 sounds like it's so far away, but it's only 4 years. And then the final criteria, which this is the lowest bar that I think almost any agency could qualify for, is your agency is not currently equipped to meet all of your data, research, planning, engagement, or coordination needs to adequately meet local water sustainability goals or state water management priorities.
So turning to the calendar as we wrap up, just want to make sure folks know where we're at. Right now, our call for proposals is open. We still have to tweak our online portal to facilitate a water core application because it'll be a little bit different. But we're open to talking with anyone about your interest, the opportunities for engagement, how to move forward. We're aiming for a July 1st priority application deadline for CivicSpark. We really haven't set a deadline, but you could keep that in mind for water core as well, so that we get those initial applications in and start to get the ball rolling with partners to scope it out, because around that time we also start recruiting fellows and we want to be able to advertise real positions. This year we had the advantage of timing over the first year, and it really helped to list real positions and have people indicate preference for real positions. So getting those applications in early is really important. I will say last year we were oversubscribed. We had a wait list set up. We had to turn some people away for CivicSpark. I'm going to guess, given that we're moving forward and I hope being successful again, we'll reach that point again. So it's in your interest to talk to us sooner than later, to put in applications sooner than later. Ideally, trying to get all service agreements signed by October 1st so that as the fellow orientation takes place, we're not finalizing contracts and folks really know where they're going. And the projects will be getting underway by mid-October, a little bit earlier than last year. We ended up delaying it a hair last year, and we're trying to move the deadline a little closer to September, actually, and hopefully by our fourth year, we'll be in that space.